Hello and welcome. I'm Campbell from Autodidactic Channel. Hope you're all having a splendid day. And today I'm just going to read through some of the text for the problems of historical chronology. Now this was put together by a team in Russia, headed up by Anatoly Fomenko. And I'll try and simplify it a bit for you because it does have a lot of big words in it basically, but I'll just read through it, and it just gives an overview of the problem with chronology, because you may or may not have heard that our chronology is completely wrong. It's out by at least 1,000 years, and what has happened is 1,000 years has been added into the calendar, and that is basically to give the script writers some distance from history so that they can try and fill things in and change the story to try and explain the things we see around us. So let's jump in and have a look at the problems of historical chronology. Roman chronology as the foundation of European chronology. Here is a concise account of the current state of ancient and medieval chronology. The importance of chronology for historical science is all the more important as this discipline allows for the determination of the time interval between the historical event and the current era. That is, they can be translated into terms of contemporary chronology and given a BC or AD dating. Nearly all fundamental history conclusions depend on the dating of events described in the source that is being studied. An altered or imprecise dating of an event defines its entire interpretation and evaluation. The current global chronology model has evolved owing to the labour of several generations of chronologists in the 17th to 19th centuries, and has Julian calendar datings ascribed to all major events of ancient history. So the dating events referred to in some freshly discovered documents are predominantly based on Roman chronology, since it is considered that all other ancient chronological datings can be linked to our calendar via direct or indirect synchronisms with the Roman dates. So that is, that our chronology can be linked to Roman chronology by the dates that were written on the actual document. In other words, Roman chronology and history are the spinal column of the consensual global chronology and history. This is why Roman history shall have to enjoy our very special attention. So, the Julian calendar, and we of course use the Gregorian calendar. So what they are saying is that the dates that are written on the Julian calendar, which has a different dating system, those dates are given as the same as the Gregorian. So if they've written 762 on an ancient document in the Julian calendar, it'll be ascribed as 762 in the Gregorian, and that is a big problem. Scaliger, Petavius and other clerical chronologers. The creation of contemporary chronology of the ancient times in the 16th and 17th centuries AD. The chronology of ancient and medieval history in its present form had been created and for the most part concluded in a series of fundamental works of the 16th and 17th century that begins with the writings of Josephus Justus Scaliger, 1540 to 1609. He was called the founder of modern chronology as a science by the modern chronologist E. Bickerman. And there is Joseph Justus Scaliger, and one of his books, the Rationarium Temporum in parts arduous. Scaliger's principal works on chronology are as follows: the Opus Novum de Emendatione Temporum from 1583, and the Thesaurium Temporum from 1606. For the most part, the body of Scaliger's work was concluded by Dionysius Petavius, who lived 1583 to 1652. The best-known book of the latter is titled De Doctrina Temporium from 1627. Gerhard Friedrich Miller revised the Russian history and chronology in the 18th century in accordance with Scaliger's scheme. And now let us mention the works of the 18th and 19th century, which contain a great array of factual chronological data. They are of great value to us since they provide a snapshot of the state of chronology during the epoch of a greater proximity to Scaliger and Petavius. So basically they're just works that were... and so this material is thus of a more primordial nature, or it hasn't been tainted as much. It must be noted that this series remains incomplete, as well as several other similar chronological works. To quote the prominent contemporary chronologist, E. Bickerman, there has been no chronological research ever conducted that could be called exhaustive and conforming to modern standards. Hence, it would be correct to call the modern consensual chronology of the classical period and the Middle Ages the Scaliger-Petavius version. We shall simply refer to it as the Scaligerian chronology. As will be pointed out, this version wasn't the only one existing in the 17th and 18th century. Its veracity has been questioned by eminent scientists. The ground-laying works of Scaliger and Petavius of the 16th and 17th century present the ancient chronology as a table of dates given without any reasons whatsoever. It is declared to have been based on ecclesiastical tradition. This is hardly surprising, since history remained predominantly ecclesial for centuries, and for the most part was written by the clergy. So that's just saying it's all to do with the church, basically. So it was all written by church tradition and the way they wanted the story told. Today it is believed that the foundations of chronology were laid by Eusebius Pamphilus and Saint Hieronymus, allegedly in the 4th century AD. We have a medieval painting of Eusebius Pamphilus and Caesarea dated 1455. It is worth noting that Eusebius of Caesarea is painted in typically medieval attire of the Renaissance epoch, most probably because he had lived in that period of time and not any earlier. So there we go. So it's just saying here that there's a guy, allegedly he lived in the 4th century, okay, but there's a medieval painting dated 1455, and there's your 1,000 years, right? Take that 1,000 off, and 4th century and the 400s. And this is the problem. This is the 1,000 years, because these are two different calendars that have been melded into one, but the dates are 1,000 years apart. So why they say this guy lived in the 400s, he actually lived in the 1400s, in these Middle Ages. This sort of 1,000-year period, it was added, and so it did happen, but not the way they told us. They told us nothing happened, and clearly that's where most things happened. Despite the fact that the Scaligerian history ascribes Eusebius to the 4th century AD during the years 260 to 340, it is interesting to note that his famous work titled The History of Time from the Genesis to the Nicene Council, the so-called Chronicle, as well as the tractate by Saint Hieronymus or Jerome, weren't discovered until very late in the Middle Ages. Apart from that, historians say that the Greek original of Eusebius AF is only available in fragmentary form nowadays and is completed by the ad libitum translation made by Saint Hieronymus. Nicephorus Callistus attempted to write the new history of the first 3 centuries in the 14th century, or revise the history of Eusebius, but he could not do more than repeat that which was written by Eusebius. However, since the work of Eusebius was only published in 1544, that is much later than the writings of Nicephorus, one has reason to wonder, could the ancient Eusebius have based his work on the medieval tractate by Nicephorus Callistus? There's a couple of good names for you guys. This guy is Friedrich Müller Gerhan, and this guy is Eusebius. So what they're saying is this guy looks, look what he's wearing. He's wearing very good clothes. He doesn't look like he's in the mud, so he looks like it's the classical period, and this is definitely classical. And he was supposed to live in the 400s. And of course, we don't even know what was going on in the 400s really, but clearly, there's something wrong with the story, is what they're saying. And all these, there's a couple of works just here that are attributed to the 400s or the 300s, but they weren't even found or published until after the 1500s. So, and then, as I said, really the only copy they've got is a known copy. So this is our problem with history. And just a bit more, we can see a painting by Cesare Nebbia of Giovanni Guerra that was allegedly created in 1585 to 1590. According to historians, it depicts a scene of Saint Jerome and his pet lion visiting the library of Eusebius in Caesarea. What we see here, however, is a typically medieval scene of the Renaissance epoch, or maybe even the epoch of 16 to 17 centuries. The library shelves are filled with books that look basically the same as those from the 17th or 18th century, in hardcovers with wide fastening straps. The artists of the 16th and 17th century have most probably painted recent medieval events and characters that were cast into the Dark Ages by the latter 17th to 18th century chronologists of the Scaligerian tradition. And these, I guess, are the pictures. I guess they're blow-ups. I can't see the lion. But this is the thing. They're saying they're in the 400s, but really, when they look at it, the only evidence of these people is from like 1100 years after they were supposed to have lived. It is assumed that Scaligerian chronology was based on the interpretations of assorted numerical data collected from the Bible. Certain basis dates that were used as reference points originated as results of scholastic exercises with numbers. For instance, according to the eminent chronologist J. Usher, the world was created on Sunday the 23rd of October 4004 BC, in the small hours of the morning. Mind-boggling precision, right? Well, one is to bear in mind that the secular chronology of the present day is largely based on the scholastic biblical chronology of the Middle Ages. E. Bickerman, a contemporary historian, is perfectly right to note that the Christian historians have made secular chronology serve ecclesial history. The compilation made by Hieronymus is the foundation of the entire edifice of Occidental chronological knowledge. So there you go. Basically, again, they're just saying that history has been skewed to fit in with the narrative that the Catholic, or probably Catholic, but the Christian religion wanted it to go in. Although Scaliger, the founding father of modern chronology as a science, had attempted to reconstruct the entire tractate of Eusebius, Bickerman tells us the datings of Eusebius that often got transcribed erroneously in manuscripts are hardly of any use to us nowadays, because they were transcribed wrong. And this is the whole J and I thing that we see all the time, guys. with the dates. Instead of ones, they've got J's, they've got I's, and sometimes they've got X's. That's what this is all talking about. Due to the controversy and the dubiety of all these medieval computations, the Genesis dating, for instance, varies greatly from document to document. Here are some main examples. The Antiochian dating is 5969 BC. Theophilus is 5508 BC, which is the Byzantine dating system. The Constantinople version, 5493 BC. Then we've got 4004, 5872, blah, 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 blah. And it says, as we can see, this temporal reference point, considered fundamental for the ancient chronology, fluctuates within the span of 2,100 years. We have only quoted the most famous examples here. It is expedient to know that there are about 200 various versions of the Genesis date in existence. Bible translators commonly refer to as the 70 interpreters today. The correct Genesis dating issue was far from being scholastic and had been given plenty of attention in the 17th and 18th century for good reason. The matter here is that the ancient documents date events in years past since Adam or since Genesis. This is why the existing millenarian discrepancies between the possible choices of this reference point substantially affect the datings of many ancient documents. So what they're saying there is, basically a lot of these chronologies are written from a start date, and that start date is when someone has decided either the world was created, Genesis, or the birth of Adam, and there's at least a 2,100 year discrepancy between all those dates. So that's a big problem. That's 2 millennia right there. And so depending on where your start date is, clearly all your other dates are going to be different to everyone else's. And so this is clearly a big problem. And again, all to do with, man-made religion. This is, it's not Christianity, it's man-made religion. Down here we have a picture. This is the painting by Cesare Nebbia and Giovanni Guerra, dated 1585 to 1590, and it depicts Saint Jerome visiting the library of Eusebius Pamphilus in Caesarea. And as you can see, it looks like a very medieval scene of the Renaissance epoch, as they say. You can see all the types of books they're reading abound, all the types of things, and just the dress looks very much like what we would call Renaissance. But allegedly, these people lived in the 400s, or in the 300s, so like 1200 years prior. So that's the thing. Is this? Why would you paint of a story that was 1200? I mean, we don't even know stories that were 1200 years ago. How would these people get him, and how were they so, such an important thing that they would paint it? So what they're saying is this is most likely painted when these people were alive, or, close to, which is the 1500s, not the 300s. Scaliger, together with D. Petavius, were the first ones to have used the astronomical method for proving but not examining critically the late medieval version of chronology of the preceding centuries. Modern commentators consider Scaliger to have ipso facto transformed this chronology into a scientific one. The scientific veneer proved sufficient. This scientific veneer proved sufficient. This scientific veneer proved sufficient for the chronologists of the 17th to 18th century to have invested unquestioning belief in the largely rigidified chronological date grid that they had inherited. It is very significant that Scaligerian chronology was initially created within the paradigm of the Western European Catholic Church, which had remained in its firm control for a great amount of time. A. Olienkov wrote, "The medieval theologians had often tried to calculate the age of the earth interpreting or assorted data contained in the Holy Writ. On having studied the texts of the Bible, Archbishop Hieronymus had to come to the conclusion that the world had been created 3,941 years prior to the beginning of modern chronology. His colleague Theophilus the bishop had extended this period to 5,515 years. So even these guys who are studying the Bible can't agree on a date. And this is the thing. They're standing in the present and they're trying to go backwards to find a start date to try and date everything. So clearly we have huge problems here. And this is another picture. An ancient miniature from the Ostrog Bible allegedly dated 1581, showing the Bible's translators and interpreters commonly referred to in nowadays as the 70 interpreters. It is assumed that they were responsible for dating Genesis 5872 BC. So these are the 70 people who got together and decided that everything started 5872 years before they sat down and decided it. And this is, I mean, come on. How's that story? Just people, with a script that they want to put out there, an agenda, deciding when the world started, and from that date they then write the history up to the point that they are. This is craziness. Their absolute trust in the infallibility of what the ecclesial chronology told them determined their entire Weltschätzung, or whatever that is. Hence their attitude to the data offered by their disciples by other disciplines was determined by whether or not it could serve the advocacy of this a priori assumption or the other, invariably based on the medieval ecclesial chronology that was later rechristened scientific. So what they're saying there is basically they decided the date that everything started, and then all the other information was said to be wrong based on the fact that it wasn't what they said, basically. And then later on, they then turned that, their chronology into a scientific method. They started calling it scientific, where it was clearly just based on, people trying to work out a date that was 5,000 years prior to their lifetimes. So this is, one of the major problems with chronology is the influence of religion and how they are trying to tie their story to try and make the script we're given work. And clearly it doesn't. It never has, but people just take the dates and everything, the calendar, for granted. They just believe it and never question if it's right or wrong. And when you do ask people, they think it's the strangest thing in the world and get quite defensive. But really, what is any of this based on? And that's the whole point. Now, this is quite a big document. I'll leave this in the notes below in the description. Let me know if you want me to do a part 2, because I can go through the next part, which gets into sort of Egypt and different, sort of cultures and how it all got messed up and basically all turned in again, into Roman or Christendom sort of history and chronology. Even gets into Isaac Newton. So there is a lot here, and this is all very, very well researched stuff, guys. So I'll leave all this below for you in the notes. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Give me a like and a comment, and let me know if you want me to do a part 2, and we can sort of go through this and just point out the major problems with the chronology that we are given as fact. Alright guys, thanks for spending some time with me. Stay awesome, because you are, and I'll talk to you all on the next upload. Bye for now.